All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. I actually got the timing pretty good there. Pretty nice, huh? I got it. Everything ended at just the right moment. I faded in, and the music stopped, and the countdown stopped, all at the same time. So that's what we want. Obviously, that's not what we always get. Phone number here, 240-242-5646. I definitely want to talk to you this Wednesday, this hump day. And yeah, I didn't go downtown. I've been really spending a lot of Wednesdays anyway on Capitol Hill lobbying Congress members for peace in Gaza to push aggressively for a ceasefire to stop funding Israel. And today I don't think there was lobbying. I may have missed it, but I didn't see it. There wasn't really anything. And I kind of felt like I needed a day off from doing that because it gets depressing. I mean, you just are bugging people that have no interest in what you're trying to sell them. So, I mean, they should, of course, but they don't. So I'd like to talk to you, 240-242-5646. I hope you'll give me a call this Wednesday on Halitics. And yeah, the focus is going to be what it's been. We're not really changing things. Constitutional crisis right now. The Trump administration very, very clearly not going to comply with a Supreme Court directive that it put together a plan to repatriate Abrego Garcia from Maryland, who was admittedly wrongly deported to El Salvador, and where he is now imprisoned in a gulag. And we don't even know if he's still alive. We have no idea. And first, Trump said, yeah, if the court wants him back, we'll bring him back. But they've changed their tune and offshored, outsourced American foreign policy to the president of El Salvador. So to me, this is grounds for impeachment, and that's the solution. It's kidnapping, right? I mean, they committed a felony. You seized somebody illegally. Now, it wasn't a mistake. First, you could say it was a mistake. Well, we didn't know we had the paperwork wrong, and we didn't realize that we didn't have legitimate reason to deport him. But now we know, but we can't do anything about it. Well, you can, obviously. You haven't taken the steps. Seems to me that's kidnapping. It's appropriate. It's illegal. It's illegal incarceration. It's false imprisonment. And they have the absolute ability to bring him back. There's a lot of questions about the legality of this. And the Supreme Court has made clear that the one check on illegal presidential action is Congress, that everything else doesn't really work. And that's what the Supreme Court has told us. They've said, yeah, you can't really prosecute the president for crimes. The State Department can't do it. He has virtually, not completely, not utterly, but virtual complete immunity from charges for anything done in the course of his duties as president, her duties, in this case, obviously, as in all cases we've had so far, the male president. So what recourse is there? And the court has made it clear. The recourse is impeachment. Now, the Congress is going to impeach him for this. They brought charges for various other, kind of questionable, picayune stuff. A Russia, conspiracy that never really existed. That was a fever dream of the Clinton team that lost in 2016. But that was grounds, I guess, and making a decision we're not going to ship arms to Ukraine. Well, that's a reason to impeach the guy. Once he's out of office, yeah, we'll impeach him for, what was it? Raskin was some sort, a coup, which maybe you do that if he had succeeded, but he was out of office. It was a political mistake, a huge political disaster to do that. Would impeachment succeed? No. There's no way you're going to get even a majority of Congress members. You aren't going to get all the Democrats to impeach Trump, and you're certainly not going to get 2/3 in the Senate. But a very strong case can be made. And I think a case that would, rather than what we've seen in the past, which has tended to make Trump the victim. tended to cause Americans to perceive Trump as somehow being unfairly persecuted. I think what we've seen over the past few months with respect, and not the tariffs. I know people make a big deal, oh, the tariffs, oh, they're so horrible, the tariff, and other things that, most Americans shrug. Most Americans don't. They recognize that tariffs will have the impact, as corrupt as the implementation may have been. And if you can find pure, evidence of pay to play, people bribing corporations, perhaps maybe even states bribing Trump administration officials to give them special dispensations or bribing Trump, yeah, go ahead. Impeach for that. That's a crime, clearly. But what, most Americans aren't getting all hot and bothered about tariffs. But I think most of us get it's not right to just simply seize people off the streets and put them in unmarked vans and ship them to gulags. And then when the Supreme Court says, hey, you didn't have a right to do that, bring them back, and you say, no, we're not going to, I think Americans get that's not right. I think when Americans see, and they have seen the images of the prisons, we understand that's not right. Now, part of the problem is, of course, Democrats are the alternative, and most Americans don't view Democrats, and understandably so, as an ally, as someone who cares about them. No, we don't think that either. But if you can present, and, look, Trump, George W. Bush's approval ratings took a big hit when people saw those Abu Ghraib pictures. Of course, Nancy Pelosi took impeachment off the table for that. There's certain actions by presidents that are, when perceived, when seen, really are recognized as cruel, as wrong, as criminal. Torture, and basically what the Trump administration is doing now to some immigrants is torture. I think you also have a very strong case that Trump is violating various laws when it comes to supporting Israel. Now, of course, same with Obama. Same with Biden, Harris. So Democrats aren't going to do anything. But yeah, the remedy is a united opposition party that presents a powerful case, which is there, that this guy is breaking the law and needs to be impeached as a result. But again, we don't have a vibrant, strong, progressive, incorruptible, non-corrupt, whatever, honest Democratic Party that has integrity. We don't have that. So we're not going to get what we need. And we're going to continue to see what few protections for our democracy remain, or for our former democracy, for what few protections for what freedoms we still have that are in place will continue to be eroded. It's not as bad here, at least. I guess you can say, hey, at least we don't live in Gaza. 25 killed there in the last 24 hours per Middle East eye, and you can see a shroud there. Little boy, probably his mother, father, who knows, sister, brother, who knows, dead. I'd love to see an investigation by Congress into this war. You got 15 Democrats out of 48, 47 in the Senate who vote against funding Israel. So good luck getting any of them to investigate. What would be really nice to see in the end is all of them going in the dock. Anybody who voted to fund, to arm Israel, all of them in the dock for genocide. They belong there. No question about it. We put all those Nazis, on trial at Nuremberg. People who were complicit, people who were responsible. Now, they didn't have a government, the functioning representative government in any way. So you tried and you convicted the Nazi leaders, the ones who actually signed the orders for killing people, those who actually, put Jews and others in the gas chambers, those who organized the Wehrmacht to shoot 33,000 people at Baba Yar. Yeah, they were prosecuted for that. Many were put to death. What about the Congress members and the senators who vote to authorize the shipment of bombs and guns and missiles to Israel? What kind of a punishment is fitting for them? I don't really believe in the death penalty, but 25 years in jail would work. Israel and the United States have killed a minimum of 51,025 identified Gazans since October 7. Think about this too. No excuses for Trump. Trump's guilty, just as guilty. Absolutely. But think about how the Biden administration's defense team were all connected to the people who make the bombs and the guns and the missiles and all of that. The Palantir is this communication system that Israel can see everything that's happening. Avril Haines was a big, she worked with Palantir. She represented Palantir. His was DNI, the Department of National Intelligence Secretary. That's our foreign policy. Both parties corrupt. Both parties complicit in genocide. And good luck getting impeachment of Trump. From March 18 through April 14, Trump and Netanyahu have killed at least 1,525 Gazans, and 25, I had the number for yesterday, perhaps close to 1,000 children. Just want to let folks know, I'm looking forward to tomorrow's program. It'll be a bit of a change. I like to get politicians. They're progressive for sure. And Alex Bastani running as a Democrat. Now, I think we're better served by abandoning the Democratic Party. And I'm going to ask Alex this. I'm going to say, hey, look, I love your platform. I love fighting for the forgotten. I love universal health care. I love $20 minimum wage. I love ending right to work. I love all of that. But what happens when you go to Congress if you're elected and you get all this pushback and you're told, hey, you're not going to get any committee assignments? And, we're not going to listen to you, and, we're not going to help you. We're not going to support you. And there'll probably be a primary challenge to you if you don't play ball. What are you going to say? Are you going to call out fellow Democrats? Will you take them on? Are you going to vote for Hakeem Jeffries to be your leader? I mean, that's the kind of question he may not want to answer. I don't know. Maybe I hope I don't lose him. But I got to ask those questions, because if the answers are satisfactory, yeah, I'll support a Democrat. I'll support Democrats who are prepared and who have demonstrated a consistent willingness to take on their own leadership in a public fashion. We haven't seen that. We have not seen that. AOC said she would. She did for a week. She camped out, right? There was that sort of climate change sit-in outside Pelosi's office. It was kind of a stunt. I don't know if it was that effective. I think there were probably better ways in that situation to get your point across. But once that failed, she is a good team player. No force to vote for AOC. I know she voted abstain, or she didn't vote for Pelosi once. She absolutely did vote for Jeffries in 22 to be the House leader. But, she voted present or something. Big deal. That was nothing. What she could have done is organized resistance to Pelosi. She didn't do that. Okay, so we're talking about ways to stand up to this administration, ways to stand up to the oligarchy, ways to stand up to the Democratic leadership. This is an organization. I saw this little, I guess, promo, whatever you want to call it, from a group called Free Speech for People. Maybe I'll put the whole, see if I can get it up as easily as possible. By the way, don't forget, please do click like, please click subscribe. If you're watching this on Facebook, which is on Facebook. I know it's even on my Facebook Halitics page, which is great because more people see it there. But if you're watching on Facebook, do me a favor, at least check out the YouTube link if you haven't yet and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Would be greatly appreciated. So I saw this in one of my pro-Palestine, one of my pro-peace, pro-people groups that I participate in. And this was cited with, I guess, some approval. I mean, there were questions about it, but so this group, and I worked with Free Speech for People when I was at Our Revolution on a sort of a strategy to hold Trump accountable by urging state attorneys general and other state, officials, elections officials, to strike Trump from the ballot because he led an insurrection. That's the allegation. And under I think it's the 14th Amendment, I'm not even sure, if you were a rebellion, if you led a rebellion against the U.S. government or participated or gave support to one, then you were barred from office. And that amendment had been put in place by the Congress and enacted into the Constitution in the wake of the Civil War to say, hey, ex-Confederates cannot be reelected. You were the governor of a state, you were a senator, you can't run for office if you were part of the Confederacy. You led an act of rebellion. You were part of a rebellion against the United States government. You can't do that. And so that was the charge against Trump, right? He violated that 14th Amendment. And I think it wasn't a totally bogus argument. I mean, I think there was some value to it, I suppose. I didn't completely disagree with it. I thought it was a bit of a stretch. I thought it was unlikely to be successful. But, hey, why not give it a shot? Maybe you can get Trump off the ticket in some states and it would make a big deal. So it was intriguing to me. I wasn't super impressed with the lawyering when I observed it. I didn't feel like their arguments were as compelling as they might have been. But, you do your best. So I'm not here to condemn Free Speech for People. But I will say, when I read this, I thought this is a bigger stretch. This is a bigger stretch than the effort to get Trump off and by the way, that effort failed. Right? I mean, there was not one state. I think one state attorney general or election official either took it under advisement or may have even made a preliminary finding that Trump was barred from the ballot, but then it was reversed by a court. I'm not sure. Maybe that was Colorado. Maine, I know there was some sympathy to this petition. At bottom, I didn't love it because I feel that the decision whether to elect somebody should be with the people. You don't take it away from the people. And if someone's convicted of a crime, that's a little bit different. But there was no crime charged. Maybe there should have been a crime, but maybe later on at the end of the Biden administration there was. But we know impeachment failed. Regardless, I thought they had a case. I didn't love it. I thought politically it wasn't a good move. I thought it made, if anything, Trump more sympathetic rather than less so. I thought the effort should have been, and I've said this over and over and over, the effort should have been on promoting progressive legislation by the Democrats that would make life better for the American people. There should have been full-throated arguments for Medicare for all. There should have been basically unanimity among the Democratic Party. If you weren't supporting Medicare for all, if you were a Joe Manchin or a Kristen Sinema, get the hell out of here. We don't want you. You're not part of the conversation. If you're not going to raise taxes, that's the Democratic Party I want to see. That's the Democratic Party that would have beaten Trump easily. A Democratic Party that did not promote war with Russia, but instead stopped war with Russia. a Democratic Party that prevented a genocide rather than a Democratic Party that promoted one, that would have beaten Trump. I think these kind of gimmicks or efforts, side issues, can we figure out a way to bar him from the ballot, that people would look at and be like, what the hell are you talking about? I don't think it was a good, again, strategically not great. Legally, there was an argument, probably a weak argument, but an argument, passed the giggle test. I don't see that here. Free speech for people saying Somerville for free speech for people and Somerville for Palestine are saying, hey, we want the Massachusetts Attorney General and the Middlesex County District Attorney to investigate criminally the unlawful kidnapping of Rümeysa Öztürk. She is the Tufts graduate student who was seized in broad daylight in view of cameras. We all saw it, hustled into an unmarked van and then transported far away. I'm not even sure where she is, I believe. I'm not sure if we know where she is. They want the state and the local prosecutor to investigate. And that's fine. I mean, go ahead, I guess, investigate. But you're not going to be able to bring charges against Trump. You're not going to be able to bring charges against those federal officers. And for several reasons. And my initial response was immediately, Trump's got so much immunity, especially from any kind of a state prosecution. There's all sorts of federal questions that are implicated, federalism. You've got federal defendants. The court has already ruled that the president has almost complete immunity for actions taken within the scope of his duties. And obviously enforcing immigration law is within the scope of his duties. But I was still somewhat intrigued. Well, do they have an argument? Like, what's the argument? Because if I'm the prosecutor, the first thing I would say, the first question I would ask, if somebody says to me, hey, look, here's a crime. I mean, we saw the crime. We all saw it. It's not like there's any question. Öztürk is hustled into a van. If I see that, and someone says, hey, you got to find out who these people are and why they kidnapped this woman and where they took her and they broke every law. If I'm a prosecutor, I would be like, damn straight, let's call the police, let's get on it. But then if I say, well, do you know who they are? Yeah, they're ICE officers. Be like, well, wait a second. You better call the Massachusetts. You better call the U.S. attorney for Boston. You better call the U.S. attorney for Massachusetts, because that's a question of federal law, right? If they're authorized, if the federal, if the U.S. code authorizes them to do that, there's nothing I can do to stop it. It's not if the code is silent, but they're tasked with enforcing immigration laws. And if the president tells them to do it, then what am I can't, my hands are tied. You say, well, but it's illegal. There's nothing in the U.S. Constitution that says they can just spirit somebody off. There's nothing in the U.S. code. And then my response as a prosecutor is, well, Trump says it's okay. Trump's the president. The Supreme Court has given him tremendous leeway. If I even commence the investigation, they'll immediately try to quash it, and they'll remove any case to federal court. So I got nothing. Now, the response, I'm just playing this all out because I think it's so interesting, where you get the idea that you can bring a criminal charge against Trump, because that's what they're saying. We want to charge him with kidnapping. Well, I think that he should be charged, but he should be charged by Congress. I think he should be charged by Congress. And I would even say this, as much as in this case, yeah, I would like it if you could charge him in Massachusetts, and if the Massachusetts Attorney General would charge him, I think that would be great because what he did is so wrong. But you're opening yourself up a real can of worms there when you do that, because what happens when you have a progressive president who's, say, pro-choice, and some state tries to arrest, a federal agent who helps a woman get an abortion? Say, well, they're violating the law against abortions here. I mean, you can come up with a million different ways that a state could try to hold a progressive president, a progressive administration, their delegates, their representatives liable, criminally liable. Now, here's an example of a court, of a case that the Supreme Court did not rule as out of bounds. This was they ultimately said you can't prosecute it because Trump just got elected president and we're not going to go forward with any lawsuits. And this wasn't a criminal, I don't believe it was criminal charges, it was civil charges, because Trump was using his office to leverage leaders in other countries to stay at Trump hotels and spend a lot of money at Trump properties. Well, that's clear evidence of corruption. That's not within his official duties, right? Enforcing immigration laws, that's tasked to the president. There's agencies that are set up, INS, ICE. That's what their job, maybe it's just ICE now, is it not INS? I don't know. That's their job, his job. His job is not to try to get a leader of a country to stay at the Trump Plaza. That's meeting with the leader is fine. You say, well, we set up a meeting and it shouldn't have been at the Trump Plaza. You'd lose that argument, but you'd lose it if you try to sue him for that. But you sure as heck have a case when Trump is doing it just to line his own pockets, I believe. Very different. You can see how it's very, very different. And that was, I believe, that case was also brought in federal court. But free speech for people saying go into state court. You ain't going to win. It's not going to stay there. It's just going to get dismissed out of hand immediately. So, I mean, I think we have to be smart. We have to use our thinking caps a little bit and not just react. Well, this is awful, which it is, what Trump did. We got to do something about it. I agree. But what you're proposing to do isn't going to make any difference whatsoever. So is it really worth it? And you can see this here. This is, presidential immunity to criminal and civil suits. I looked this up. This is pretty interesting. Samuel Strom, I thought he made a pretty, he explained the law. I mean, I wasn't that persuasive. He just explains it. So is the president immune from criminal liability? And what that decision was in Trump v. U.S., presidents are presumptively immune from criminal prosecutions, which is what they're calling for, what free speech for people is calling for. But he's immune from it. The immunity only extends to official acts they took as president. So telling the leader of another country, you got to stay at a Trump hotel, well, that's not an official act. But it is an official act when you're enforcing immigration law. So, no. And then it goes on. Strom goes on to say the government can rebut the presumption. I think that means if the state of Maryland, of Massachusetts, if they're going to investigate Trump, would say, well, this prosecution would not pose any dangers of intrusion on the authority and functions of the executive branch. Of course it would. Of course it would. I mean, I think his authority and function should be intruded on, but it would intrude on it. You have no case. And then the court, or it said Strom rather, I'm sorry, the guy who wrote this article, and he was right. He did a good job with it. I mean, I don't think it was exactly rocket science, not to be mean to him, but I mean, this is what the court said. Oh, but he writes it well. He writes it clearly. So that's all good. So what does Strom say? Where do you hold presidents accountable? in the Congress. It's the House of Representatives' job to impeach. That's where free speech for people. Go pressure your Congress member. Go tell Maura Healey, the governor, to push the Massachusetts congressional delegation, which I believe is all Democratic. I believe every single one. Go talk to Jim McGovern. Tell him he's like the most progressive one there. Tell Jim McGovern. Ask Ed Markey to, and Warren, right? Their senators are actually a little more progressive than their Congress members. Ask Markey and Warren to lobby the Congress members. What about Ayanna Pressley? Could she, that's what you want to do. And you get this from The Nation, where they make the same basic point. It's not the courts that can stop. The courts can stop specific actions by Trump. The Supreme Court said, hey, you can't just sweep people up and then send them overseas. You can't do that. And Trump's ignoring that. He's flying that order. Seems to me like that's certainly a very strong argument that that's a high crime or misdemeanor. So go at it, Congress. The problem is, that won't happen. This ain't going to happen. But it would be nice. I looked at the letter, right? Because free speech for people, I'm really good. What kind of triggered me to do this was, well, one, I know who Free Speech for People. I've asked them to come on this program. They won't come on. But I was somebody I'm close to implored me, what can we do? What can be done? Can they impeach Trump? Well, of course they could. They should, but they won't. But they should, and they have a solid basis. This is what, if you think the Democratic Party is your ally, go ask them why they're not going to impeach this guy. I remember, what did Jamie Raskin say? Well, if I could get a few people, I'd do it. Well, go out and get them for this. Because this is the thing. They're grandstanders, the Democrats. They're not going to take up the mantle for foreign students, for people here on visas. They just won't do it. There's really nothing in it for them. And it's not hyper partisan. This is something that people just instinctively know is wrong. This isn't a way to divide poor, struggling, working people the way the 2021 impeachment was. It was a perfect way to divide people up rather than unite them politically. Democrats aren't about uniting poor, struggling, working people. Like Republicans, they're much more about dividing them. So I looked at the free speech, but again, if I was a prosecutor, somebody said to me, I want you to go after these ICE agents and I want you to go investigate Trump for violating the constitutional rights of this student. I want you to look into whether they committed a crime they committed the crime of kidnapping, which is what is alleged. If somebody came to me and said that, I would want to know, what's your basis? Not in terms of the facts. What's your basis under the law that I can do this, that I can even investigate a sitting president? Provide me with some cites. What has this been done before? Has the court ruled it's okay? Give me some legal basis for doing that. So here's what the letter says. The letter says and it's horrific. I'm going to read it. On March 25, 25, plainclothes ICE agents illegally abducted Rümeysa Öztürk, a Turkish citizen, Fulbright scholar studying at Tufts on a valid student visa. The undisputed facts provide a basis for undertaking criminal investigation into whether senior Trump officials, Secretary of State Rubio and Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem and ICE agents conspired to kidnap Öztürk. They unlawfully stripped her of her visa, forcibly restrained and arrested her, and secretly smuggled her out of Massachusetts, purposefully and in defiance of a court order, to a detention facility in Louisiana, where she's been denied access to her attorneys, and where her attorneys cannot verify the conditions of her confinement or whether she is receiving adequate medical care. And then the letter actually continues. There's a lot there. Her only offense is that she exercised her constitutional right to free speech in an op-ed in a Tufts school newspaper. And they go on to say this. Ms. Öztürk's arrest represents a dangerous and illegal assault on our Constitution. Now, were they talking about the Massachusetts Constitution or the U.S. Constitution? They're purposefully silent. Because if it's an assault on the U.S. Constitution, that's clearly a federal question that would be properly in the federal courts. And if it's an assault on the Massachusetts Constitution, the court would have no authority to rule on whether Trump and his minions violated that Constitution if what he did and they did was legal, was actually legal, authorized under the U.S. Code and the U.S. Constitution. So they don't tell you. But what they also don't do is provide any legal authority. So, I mean, what's the point? You can't do it. You're not going to succeed. And it, to me, is such a waste of time and energy and effort. So I got a huge problem with that. I actually really, really do. Don't do that. This is what you want to stop Trump. Then publicize this. This is where, and I don't know, did I get this from AP? I think I did. I don't remember if that was the source. I wish I had the exact source, but I do put the site there, Getty Images. But this was the AP, according to AP. So that's what it's, you see all those people jammed together in that tiny little space. It's so awful. It's so wrong. It's so cruel. And that's where Abrego Garcia is right now, the Maryland man. Let me give you the better picture. This is the full shot. And there's one on Halitics that I put. It's just so awful, where you see all those people just sort of on their knees. I didn't use that picture for this because I couldn't find it online, and I didn't want to document it without being confident it was a legit shot. It's horrific what these people do, what Trump's done, and in concert with this tyrant in El Salvador. And I understand they have terrible gang violence. I get that. But a big part of that gang violence is obviously the poverty that the U.S. government, through free trade policies, through very, very heavy-handed actions that, controlling the internal policies of that country and others in Latin America. We created the conditions that caused those gangs. Here's Marco Rubio. So again, my view, Trump should be impeached. Rubio should be impeached. That's your remedy. But it's not going to happen because the Democrats have zero appetite for challenging him on crimes that they themselves are also guilty of. Remember, Obama was the great deporter. Remember, Hillary was responsible for the coup in Honduras that installed a military junta instead of a democratic socialist as president. So both parties have created these conditions. And the Democrats aren't going to go after Trump for that.
I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin. Except for Venezuela, that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President, No, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple.
But it's not foreign policy. So you see, here's the Secretary of State. That's Trump's Secretary of State saying, yeah, we're not going to obey the Supreme Court. We're not going to do what the Supreme Court says. And brings up the fact that when he was 16 years old, he did enter the country illegally. But the allegations of gang membership are virtually, there is an allegation, a cop who has been convicted of taking a bribe, I believe, using authority to, I believe what he was charged also with was using his authority to procure sex, threatening somebody, extorting sex from them. That's the source of the claim that Abrego Garcia is in a gang, was in a gang many years ago. And the Supreme Court has said, no, you can't do that. You can't just take somebody like that and send them overseas without giving them any hearing whatsoever, without any process. And Marco Rubio says, I don't care. I'm going to do it. We're going to do it. So impeach him, for crying out loud. Here's what Senator Chris Van Hollen, who, by the way, is in El Salvador right now. I give him a lot of credit. He actually went down there. I just saw him tweet just before I went on air. He'd actually landed in San Salvador. He's going to try to see Abrego Garcia. I hope he gets to see him. Here's what Chris Van Hollen has to say.
You know, Marco Rubio is not conducting much foreign policy these days, but he has become the guy who disappears foreign students in the United States and even people with green cards, permanent residents, for exercising their First Amendment rights. And today we read in the story in the Washington Post that an internal State Department memo clearly indicates that in the case of a Fulbright student, Ms. Öztürk, that they had no basis at all for claiming she was disrupting U.S. foreign policy or engaging in anti-Semitic activities. And yet this is the claim that Marco Rubio is making in public. So it turns out that it's a big lie. As has been the case with students, we're protesting U.S. foreign policy, U.S. support for the Netanyahu government's actions and conduct in the war in Gaza. This is all about preventing any criticism of the Netanyahu government. That is a violation of people's First Amendment rights. You can agree or disagree with the content, but you can't disappear people for exercising their First Amendment rights. And that's what Rubio is doing. So to Marco Rubio, why don't you stop picking on vulnerable students? And why don't you show up and testify in front of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee? Something you have not done since you were confirmed. Because I'll tell you, I think that the Trump plan to remove 2 million Palestinians from Gaza is despicable. And it's despicable that it's been embraced by the Netanyahu government, including his far-right partners. So if you want to talk about U.S. foreign policy and U.S. foreign policy toward the Netanyahu government, why don't you come to the Foreign Relations Committee and stop picking on students and disappearing them for exercising their First Amendment rights?
All right, so obviously Chris Van Hollen just made a very, very strong case for impeaching Marco Rubio, right? I mean, there's no question about it. He's saying, hey, you're disappearing, kidnapping, falsely arresting people illegally, he used that word, I believe, for exercising their First Amendment rights. So impeach him. By the way, very strong. I love it. Here's my problem. I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with what he said, but here's why I have a problem. Nevertheless, Chris Van Hollen is maybe not my new favorite senator, but he's about as not bad as they get. But here's the problem. Marco Rubio unanimously confirmed as Secretary of State, becoming first member of second Trump cabinet. All 99 senators. And I was trying to think, who's the 100th? Who was somebody die or something? I guess, I don't know. There was only 99 senators, not 100. I don't know who the 100th is. I can't figure that one out. I'm still wondering about that. But if you know, put it in the chat or call me, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. I just got a voicemail. There's probably somebody called me off hours. This was not unforeseeable. You know, Chris Van Hollen just went on about how bad Rubio has been in terms of caping for the Israeli genocide. Well, you knew that going in. He's been an incredible Zionist. He's been totally pro-Zionist from day one, practically, has Marco Rubio. So why'd you vote to confirm him? Van Hollen, you kind of lose me a little bit there. All right, 240-242-5646. Just a few more minutes. What is it, 12:45? The president of El Salvador says, I'm not going to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia. I mean, so what? The idea that Trump, and not just Trump, also Pam Bondi now, right? The Secretary of State. Oh, yeah, we're not going to let the Supreme Court tell us what to do. Is absurd. Obviously, this guy Bukele is going to do whatever Trump tells him. Trump said to him, tell us you can't bring him back. Pam Bondi says it's up to El Salvador. No, you used your leverage. You know, for a moment there, I thought Trump had a little bit of a spine. He sent his boy Witkoff over to Bibi and said, I don't care about your damn Sabbath. You're meeting with me. We're going to stop killing Palestinians for a few months. Right? But here, we're going to let some, tin pot dictator Bukele tell us he's not going to return Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the U.S. in the teeth of a Supreme Court directive that you make plans to bring them back. Now, I want to show, I made the point that Democrats lose a lot of credibility in my book, not that they ever had any, but whatever they might have had, even someone who, on balance, is pretty good, Mr. or Senator Van Hollen, because he personally, as did every Democrat, voted to confirm Marco Rubio, which is a terrible, terrible thing to do. But to be fair, the Senate Dems did not vote for Pam Bondi. I had to look this up. I think their main concern was she was clearly closely tied to Trump. Personally tied to Trump. Not even Trump as president, but I don't know, she had done him some solid when Trump University was being sued because it was a scam. And so former students were pissed off and they wanted their money back because they couldn't get jobs and they didn't get a diploma and what they were promised they didn't get. And they brought suit in Florida. And Pam Bondi basically threw it out, made sure that it never saw the light of day, did whatever she could to protect Trump under those circumstances. So the Senate Democrats in that case were a little bit more willing to stand up to her. She also wasn't a senator. And she got in, but only with 54 votes from all Republicans. I guess one or two, maybe one Democrat crossed the aisle. Here's the thing. You didn't have to have a vote on Pam Bondi to be the Attorney General. Is that her job? Yeah. You didn't have to have that vote. You could have had Matt Gaetz be Attorney General. He would have been a lot less awful. He would have been a lot more independent. He wasn't tied into Trump. You could have had Matt Gaetz as your Secretary of State, or Attorney General, rather. And I question whether what he would have said or how he would have reacted to this. But there was this political game played. Oh, we can score off Trump by torpedoing Gaetz because he engaged in, really sketchy, sleazy stuff. There's allegations. I guess he was with an underage prostitute. I mean, the guy's low rent. Let's not deny it. He is. But he wouldn't have done nearly as much harm to the American people if he were Attorney General. But the Democratic Party, they don't care. It's all just performative as far as they're concerned. It's not really about strategizing in ways that will make life better for poor, struggling, and working people. For people like Kilmar Abrego Garcia. All right, I mentioned, I want to just, this guy, honestly, he's showing you the way to a degree. He just described all the, the basis, the very strong basis for an impeachment. Hey, you don't want to impeach Trump? Go after a lower hanging fruit. Go after Rubio for, as you put it, disappearing people. I think the charge I would proffer would be kidnapping and false imprisonment, but disappearing you can use in your brief describing what he did. So here's what Van Hollen is doing now. So I want to be fair to Democrats. They do something good, I'll center it.
I think you announced today that you're going to be going to El Salvador. You had said earlier in the week you're going to try to talk to President Bukele. Failing that, you would go to El Salvador. Tell me what your plan is here.
Well, Chris, you laid out the stakes very clearly, both for the country in terms of the Trump attack on freedom and in the case of Kilmar, who is Exhibit A of a bully trying to start by picking on the most vulnerable. So I promised that his wife and his family that I would do everything I could 24/7 to try to bring him home. And that's why I am going to El Salvador. Two reasons. One is to try to talk to government officials about his release. This is a person who the Trump administration conceded had been erroneously abducted and sent to the prison in El Salvador, and to see about how he's doing, what his personal welfare is, if I will be allowed to see him. But my view is, Chris, that we need to keep a spotlight.
I'm going to stop it there for just a sec. I don't want to see Rachel Maddow's face, sorry, but there's Kilmar Abrego Garcia, and I think it's important to note he has no tats on his face. Now, I think the basis for the claim that he was involved, or at least part of the basis for the claim that he was involved with a gang, is that he was wearing like a Chicago Bulls cap or something, and there were a lot of gang members in his area in Maryland that apparently were wearing Chicago Bulls gear, something to that effect. That's what you're going with. And it was, again, the affidavit, I think, was by this crooked cop. We're just going to say, okay, you can do this. Just go ahead. Just seize people. I give, and again, the unmarked face is a big deal. Because if you look at some of the photos from the gangsters down, or the people incarcerated in El Salvador who are supposedly gang members, they have tattoos all over their whole faces are covered with ink. The fact that he doesn't have that doesn't prove, of course, he's not a gang. But it belies the argument that it's so clear, it's so obvious that he's a thug. Just by looking at him, we can tell. No, just by looking at him, you can't tell.
On this injustice for both for Kilmar and his family, but for all the other reasons you outlined in your opening statement.
All right, so there's Van Hollen, and again, he is now in El Salvador. I got his tweet. I'm not going to share that. No, I have some videos. I was at this event Monday night. Actually I physically got into my car and drove up to Columbia, Maryland, the East Branch Library there, which is very nice. It's a very nice facility, to participate in and to observe and participate in a meeting that was how do we respond, or how do we live through, how do we survive the Trump administration? And I wanted to go badly. I wanted to be at that meeting badly because my old boss from our evolution was there, or virtually. Now, I was there in reality. He was there virtually. And I really wanted to, check out what he had to say. And I wanted to ask him some questions. I've tried to get him on my show. He won't come on my show. He was on with Breonna Joy Gray not too long ago. It was about 90-minute with Marianne Williamson. As far as I can tell, he wasn't happy with that interview. It wasn't promoted by Our Revolution that I saw. She asked him tough questions. She asked him, why are you sticking with the Democratic Party? Why are you promoting the Democratic Party? So, he wasn't happy with that. And she has a big audience, so he'll go on her program at least once, maybe not again, but at least once to make the case that, Our Revolution is a good organization. It's a progressive organization. You should join the organization. And she kept, his feet to the fire. Also, on the Young Turks, Cenk asked some pretty good questions. He held his feet to Joseph's feet to the fire too, to a degree. And I wanted to do that since I was part of that organization. I've been very disappointed, personally disappointed with its direction. So I got an opportunity to ask him questions, and I decided I was going to take it. If I went up there, and that included meeting with, being at the meeting, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and listening. So I had two questions I asked, and don't really have the time. It's almost 1 now. So I'm not going to go through the whole video, or even close to it. It's about 90 minutes, but I am going to give you my second question and then provide his response, and let you kind of see what you think about this. All right, so here we go. I hope I get the right. Let's go. Here we go.
Well, we do have a audience question.
Yeah, I just want to follow up, especially to what Joseph said, but what all the panelists said. Hal Ginsberg here. Aren't these hands-off rallies really problematic in the sense that the speakers, especially the Democratic speakers, the Congress members, are focusing all of their ire, all of their anger on the Republicans and on Trump. And although they pay lip service to the corruption within the Democratic Party, the warmongering in the Democratic Party, they basically always pivot to deflect it towards Trump and his ilk. And this, in fact, makes things worse, does it not? Because it says that the two choices are two terrible choices. Isn't it time to recognize that the Democratic problem, no less than the Republican Party, is a significant cause of where we are now? And that the only solution is for organizations that have influence, that have donors, that have paid staffers, need to lead their organizations to an emerging party that is pro-worker, unlike the Democrats, that is pro-environment, unlike the Democrats, that is pro-peace, unlike the Democrats.
Exactly.
And so I'll just throw on that. The hands-off rallies actually push down, they tamp down any mention of the Palestinian genocide, while at the same time, many of them used the phrase hands off NATO. So they were actually pushing war at those rallies, pushing war in two ways. Let's not say anything about what Trump is doing, just as the same as what Harris Biden did. And let's try to get war going, gin it up in Ukraine. So, for example, you have that very, very terrible example from the rallies. I'd also note that at the rally in LA, AOC made a big deal, and rightly so, about insider trading and all the day trading that many Congress members do. I note that Ro Khanna's net worth is somewhere between 33 and $100 million. And Unusual Whales reported that he and his family are often making 10, 12 trades a day. And this is since the inauguration of Trump. I'm wondering, Ro Khanna, an ally of our revolution, a friend of our revolution, has been asked about this on any of the calls that he has made where he's appeared.
I said specifically, Ro Khanna is one of your most, frequent guests on our revolution calls. Do you ever ask him about his day trading? Do you hold him accountable? You say, this isn't working. You can't do this. It looks really, really bad. You're super rich and you're taking advantage of your spot, your position, or certainly even if you're not, it sure looks like it. Do you ask him about that? So I know this question went on and on. Nobody was responding. Nobody was answering. So I just kept going. I sort of felt bad about that, but you only get one bite at the apple.
For our revolution. And with that,
It sounds like a question for Joseph.
I also would like to add something that I have some friends who work in a Baltimore rally that happened.
So after I finished, one of the other guests there piled on and said, yeah, I have the same questions. Even though it went on for a long time, another host actually said, yeah, I was at a Baltimore rally and exactly what Hal said happened. It was a Democratic rally.
I think last weekend, and similar sentiments were shared. I think Palestine was mentioned once during that whole rally. It felt, from what I understand, because I was not there, it was explained to me that it felt like a pro-Democrat rally more than anything. There was not really much criticism thrown at the Democratic Party about how they handle the election, how they really failed to address Trump and all that. So, yeah, I just wanted to share that.
And I would just like to add that before actually Joseph.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, keep it up there. Yes. Oh, go ahead, Joseph. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I agree. I think, Democrats are part of the problem. I think we all see that. We have a party that was complicit in the rise of a global free trade economy that decimated the middle class, decimated unions in the United States. We have a party that takes money from billionaires in the Wall Street elites, and that's what corrupted the Democratic Party. And and it's no different than the Republicans. And, I think it's interesting that, some Democrats like Neera Tanden are aligning with, the bulwark, quote unquote, the bulwark conservative Republicans who are anti-Trump. That being said, you don't see any of them necessarily talking about the problem of money, the corrosive influence of money in our political system. You don't see them renouncing billionaires, and you don't see them saying that we need a better system. And I think that's problematic. If anything...
Right, so Joseph's agreeing with everything I said. There's no dispute. He doesn't challenge what I said. He says, yes, they're corrupt. Yes, they're part of the problem. But then, and I'm so sorry for the poor quality of this video, I actually had recorded on my computer. I thought I had recorded, but instead I didn't record. And so I'm stuck with the official recording, which obviously isn't very good. But he acknowledges the depth of the problem. He acknowledges that they are part of the problem. But he doesn't say we're going to stop supporting them. He doesn't say we're going to stop being allies of the Democratic Party. He doesn't respond. Well, he will respond to what I said about Ro Khanna, which was, Do you ever ask him about about all that day trading he does? And let's finish off with Joseph and we'll call it a day.
This is a fight not between Democrats and Republicans or, black versus white or Latino versus any other group. This is ultimately a fight between those who have a disproportionate amount of wealth and power and want to utilize that to keep us down and to, in fact,
So again, Joe's a very smart guy, and he and I had conversation. Now he won't answer my calls. He won't talk to me. He'll come on Halitics. But when he's pinned down, he's like, yeah, your analysis is correct, which I'm not surprised he would say, because it's pretty much impossible to argue with it, but also because he said that to me before. He gets it. But he's the executive director of a nonprofit that raises money from Democratic-leaning people, and the people that contribute are wealthier than the rank and file members. And there are 2 Democratic National Committee members on his board that he has to respond to, that he has to answer to, and they probably made it abundantly clear, you're not leaving the Democratic fold. Should he keep doing it? I don't think so. I think you get that it's a problem, stop doing it. Get another job. Do podcasts. But got a family, got a young kid at home. Yeah, you got to feed the and this is what, by the way, our system has done to us. Even people who are very bright and who understand the dynamic and who I'm going to believe went into organizing and progressive politics for the right reasons, because they care about people. In the end, they have to be constantly watching out just how far they can go, how much they can really take on the establishment without losing their job, without being, cast aside, cast adrift. That's what this system does to us. We're almost all of us, I am. We all are making terrible compromises, and the losers, again, poor, struggling, and working class people in this country and around the world.
De-citizenship us, deplatform us. And so that's the key issue. It's money. And in terms of, Hal asked about like Ro Khanna, and, there are Democrats, yes, who take money from big donors. And that is a problem. I don't think billionaires should be allowed in the Democratic Party. I don't think we should allow any of these industries.
So I'm going to stop it real quick there. So remember what I asked him was, have you ever asked Ro Khanna about his day trading? And the answer, he doesn't provide. But I can tell you from what I've seen, I may have missed it. No, we have Ro on and we just let him talk and talk and talk and condemn the Republicans and not acknowledge his own complicity, his own contribution to the problem. We don't force him to discuss that. We don't bring it up. And there's also one other thing that's quite ironic when Joseph says, I don't believe the Democrats should have billionaires in the party, but you did a live stream from the DNC when they elected Ken Martin to be the new chair, and he flat out and said he likes the Democrats have their good billionaires, and you extolled him as the new chair. So you say one thing when you're confronted with tough question, not even that tough, but with a question in a progressive space and where other people will say, hey, the Democrats are the problem, the Democrats are the problem. Why are you supporting them? Oh, yeah, the Democrats are the problem, but we're going to keep supporting them.
That are regulated by the United States government to subsidize candidates for office. I think that is the fundamental problem. And we allowed those lines to get blurred on the Democratic side, which I think created the conditions precedent for the rise of Trump.
All right, so there it is. I mean, he's right. It could have been me speaking. But that makes it so frustrating because we clearly need to unite in support of true progressive policies to take on the oligarchy, to take on the caucustocracy, to take on the duopoly. Call it whatever the hell you want. It doesn't really matter. We all know what we're talking about here. All right. Thank you for being a viewer. Thank you for checking out Halitics. I got a call yesterday when Arlen was on, but unfortunately I didn't hear the phone ring. I did have the phone set, so I should hear it today, but I did hear it and I couldn't get to it. I don't know. Remember, tomorrow we got a really good show. We got Alex Bastani joining us. I mentioned he is a Democratic progressive candidate. He'll be I'm sure, the most progressive candidate running for governor in Old Virginia. I don't know, what is their nickname? They have a nickname of some sort. I don't. I like to use the state nicknames, but Commonwealth, obviously, of Virginia. So we're looking forward to talking to Alex Bastani tomorrow. Hope you'll join me. And that is going to do it. And I'll see you tomorrow.